Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. Victoria Greer is a somatic experiencer, practitioner, somatic psychology expert, naturopath, and functional medicine practitioner. She's also steeped in the energetic study of the archetypes of the ancient Chinese I Ching. Her work meets people at the place where the body, the nervous system, and the archetypal and energetic infrastructure of someone's being becomes the same conversation. Becoming a mother to her now 11-month-old twins has distilled years of clinical work into a recognition of the essential and exact ways to create safe, relational container in which people can arrive at who they were always here to be. Her work now exists inside Temenos, a sacred space for transformation where somatic and integrative modalities coexist with a threefold synthesis of the I Ching, human design, and gene keys. Good to see you, Victoria.
It's so good to see you.
So a lot to talk about, but I will say I've been following your work. I mean, I've known you for a long time, but I've been following your recent work on Substack, Instagram. And I read something and go, oh my gosh, you just challenged the basic premise of my work. This is awesome. I can't wait to have a conversation with her. Then a couple weeks later, I read something else like, oh my God, she just challenged another basic premise of my work. Holy crap. So I've been looking forward to this conversation with you recorded, just to kind of do a deep dive. But
Mm.
before we kind of dive into the philosophical, psychological dimensions of this, Victoria, can you share a little bit about the path that led you to be the person you are today, including the work that you do?
Yeah, it's such a winding path, and I think anyone who gets to our age has to have a winding path. I'm just going to age us both.
The gray
Um,
hair, you have none.
I don't, you can't tell. This is the postpartum regrowth and all the things, but I'm definitely graying. Life gives us those experiences, and mine have been much more emergent than a lot of others. Like my life experience from a very early age took me out of the normal run of my life. So I got very sick when I was 17. That pulls me out of all of the normal milestones. And I was just lucky happenstance enough to have my mom, who was already involved within the I Ching. Yes, I pick words that we say differently in different languages, but she was part of this world that was right at the first cohort through human design, which meant that we were right at the forefront of gene keys as well. And so that's always been there for me. That it's so innate to my system. We're going on 20 odd years, 25 years of being around those systems, that for most of my clinical and professional life, I have sort of forgotten that they existed. And what I mean by that is they became such the bedrock of who I am and how I interface and what influenced and informed my thinking that I forgot to remember that they were there. And that's relevant because that gives me a certain forgetting that leads to a remembering. And so my naturopathy, my functional medicine became my first real career once I'd got my health back. And obviously we learn what we then go on and teach. So I learned the functional medicine modalities and felt very versatile in the study of the body. And so began a career there. Then realized that I was dealing with complex chronic illness, which meant that most of my clients were in very different states of traumatized systems, which were leading to physiological problems, which took me all the way back to things I'd already studied, these somatic psychology principles, body mechanics of how formation around trauma. And I was like, oh, that now needs to be relevant. So sort of brought all that in messily, ended up trying to treat patients from all angles. And it becomes difficult because people want a quick fix body solution. And I'm like, so childhood trauma. Or people go in for like childhood trauma and go, yes, but I'm always going to be ill. And this link between these two worlds is where I've lived for the majority of my professional life. And then, as you mentioned in your introduction, the most important evolution has happened to me in the last year and a bit, and that is becoming a wife and becoming a mother. And those things, more than any client I've ever had or any career I've tried to have, took my learnings and went, okay, here's the testing ground. Like, here's the real, does it work in real life? All of this stuff, particularly motherhood to twins. It is just, you see nervous system regulation and your patterns and your partner's patterns and all of the things in such a stark cause and effect situation that suddenly there I was doing more of the archetype work and bringing back the origins. And it's really landed for me in the last few months, not in the early months of preemie twins and all of that, but in the last few months, how much the systems that you mentioned in your introduction, the I Ching, the human design, gene keys, they're not just systems for me. They're not analysis tools. They really were so foundational for everything that I had been doing. And I have such a lot of wisdom there that I'm starting to bring those things back in to be really rounded in a different way of looking at these things that I've mentioned. So physiological illness and trauma patterning. And I think that we speak a lot in our industry about the patterns and the behaviors and the things that are the results. And we talk a lot about the consequences of these traumatic imprints that we end up with. We talk a lot about how we end up behaving in these contexts as a sort of result of pain, a result of suffering. And I have all of this wisdom from these systems, which says, well, yes, and these patterns are also innate. They're how we distinguish ourselves from other in a relational context, irrespective of trauma. And so my fascination is not only looking at what trauma does to those patterns, but also at looking at, but what was underneath that to begin with? Like, how was our formation so foundational and fundamental that yes, there's an adaptation, but we are already coded and encoded to behave and show up in certain ways. And understanding all of that feels to me like it completes a lot of the work that I've been doing for my career thus far.
So just so I'm clear and understand, so you're saying that the trauma expresses itself through amplifying pre-existing patterns of behavior.
Or messing them up. So it can do both and. So there is, the trauma doesn't create, it
Mhm.
changes. So it can either exacerbate and deepen a contraction frequency around a pattern that you have, or it can change it slightly so that you feel obligated to do it differently. But it's not going to create anything from scratch. It breaks what you already had in a predictable way. And a lot of the tools that are kind of in the modern somatic world or therapeutic world, they can diagnose back to like ground zero. But ground zero had content. And that's where I think a lot of these things are missing, because it's not that you never attached and then that attachment got broken. You absolutely attached. And some people attach in different ways and then
Yeah.
attach with trauma. But there are certain elements of, so how do I now, whether I've had trauma that I think is trauma or whether I just had parenting that was parenting or all the things, how do I now have a container of relationship, and what do I bring? Always. What may be good, may be bad, may never change, maybe it's not something to fix. And we say that a lot in trauma work. We say, oh, it's not going to fit. We don't need to fix it. But we always go about trying to fix it. That's the
Right.
paradigm we hold. But there is also the thing that's there, which is okay. So my pattern, and it's beautiful, is when I'm in contraction, I'll do it this way. But when I'm open hearted, same pattern, but I'm going to do it this way. And it carries a different frequency, a different energy, and a different way of breathing through it. So instead of becoming a staccato, frightened lock up and leads to pain, it's a flow, and that's my natural state. And oftentimes they're so close to each other, and the only difference is fear and contraction, or opening and genuine breathing through the process. Because life is bumpy. And so knowing how you navigate the bumpy without freezing and going, I can't do it anymore, is just as valuable as like trying to get to a point where it's never bumpy.
And so this leads to one of my readings of your work on regulation.
I love this. I think this triggered you slightly, didn't it, Michael?
Oh, it did. Awesome. I even reposted it because, like, okay, this is awesome. I got to put it out. So I really appreciate everything you just shared, and I can see the connection between like the transpersonal, foundational uniqueness of the individual and how it's either expresses amplified or slightly modified due to trauma or the parents doing whatever they do, not necessarily traumatically, but like they're being parents, perfectly doing the thing and they're humans and whatever stuff.
Mhm.
Cool. Let's just put that aside, but that's kind of lays the foundation for this conversation. Talk to me about regulation and your take on it.
I think I think it's fair to say that if regulation had never been used as a word in the somatic industry, I would have less problems with it. Let's just put
Okay.
that. So I think that my biggest problem with regulation, especially as a woman, and I can only speak from a woman-centric lens, and this isn't feminine, masculine, it's not that. It's just I've had my experience. And as a woman, as a mom, as a all the things, my to-do list is really damn long. And to me, when people say, "Oh, PS, before you do anything, please be regulated," I feel like it adds another thing to my to-do list. So that's my first point of like, well, hang on a second. And it also feels like it is creating artificial conditions around the container in which I enter relationally. So the whole point being regulation does great things, gives you more capacity, allows you to show up in a space where, say, you're having a conflict with your partner, which is kind of the topic of where I led this. You show up and you're in the I space. You know, we've all done this. Like I'm going to lead with I sentences so that it's not automatically triggering. I'm going to acknowledge my role here. I'm going to nonviolent communication my way through this conversation. And everything that I've just said is effortful on my part to take me away from my feeling and my natural state in order to have the conversation about something. So I am already a step removed. And what I feel in that process is that, one, it isn't authentic. So I'm dysregulated, I'm messy, I'm scared, but it's also my job to get to a place where I have to give you stuff that I've decoded and got down to some kind of cleaner space so that you can take it easily. And sometimes that's possible, and sometimes it's the right thing to do. But, and I am only talking about strong bonds, partners with whom there is a relational container that contains all of.
Allows that to occur. Yeah.
And if it's supposed to contain all of you, your life partner, for example, why doesn't it also contain the dysregulated you? And that means behaving, quote unquote, badly. So I'm going to start with a you sentence. I'm going to start with the thing that's going to trigger you and touch your buttons. Do you know why I'm going to do that? Because it's human and because I'm hurt and my natural instinct is to lash out and hurt you. It's so immature. It's absolutely emotionally imperfect. And it is exactly what my partnership should be able to contain so that I get to be messy and then get to repair within all of that. Because that's the thing that we never get when our rupture wounds happen in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Messiness happened and that wasn't repaired. And so the modern trauma world has sort of started to talk about this. Let's take so much responsibility. None of that's untrue. Like it's really accurate to say that when you are triggered, you're triggered and you should take responsibility for those triggers. But the route to taking responsibility doesn't have to be a me, myself, and I in my room alone until I can be regulated and calm enough to interface. A safe relationship should have the capacity to take the non-regulated. And that's my big statement here. It isn't that there isn't better ways to have conversations with your boss or better ways to have conversations with your mother-in-law. Like, no, do your tidy work there. But when there is a safe
Mhm.
container doesn't require cleanup before behaving.
Yeah. I get
It
that.
requires cleanup afterwards. Like, I'm not saying that you won't then have to go, damn, I entered that conversation completely dysregulated and I said you sentences and I didn't really mean it. But you know what? If I cannot be my teenage girl, my 6-year-old, my, immature 21-year-old with my husband, that's not a safe container. Like that is artificial. It's somewhere where I am still performing. And my biggest wounding in my entire life is immaterial. But the consequence to that, for me personally, was performance. I acted my way through life. And one of the biggest shifts in my marriage is I get to be not the therapist, not the person that does this work. And it's freaking important. Not only because life's stressful and complicated and there has to be a place where I can be messy, but this is my world. Like I'm supposed to be the one that does all of this right. And I have to have a space where I can't and I don't. And I, to be clear, my husband has the permission to say to me, "You're being a bitch in this moment." In those words, in that phraseology, because it's true. And those are the greatest, most healing conversations we can have, where I show up completely dysregulated, spew my emotional immaturity all over the carpet, and then we clean it up together because that's beautiful. When you can be dysregulated and have a co-anchor in the cleanup, that's so therapeutic.
So that's awesome. Kate, and I think it'd be helpful to define what a psychologically safe container looks like. So people know like, oh, that's what's almost necessary for all these different parts of us at different ages of maturity come out in a safe way to do the expression authentically. The repair happens because the container is built, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. So what does that look like?
It's so interesting because if you're trying to say it's safe, it's probably not safe. So I'll share with you what I noticed the first time I noticed that my container was safe. Um, and I qualify myself self as one of the most creative escape artists on the planet when it comes to trauma stuff. Like my thing is, I'm running away. I'm leaving. I'm yeah, I'm just not gonna. The first time I knew my relationship was safe is that core pattern showed up so loudly alongside a voice that said, maybe I don't have to run away. It was quiet. It was a whisper, but that was my recognition. And so it wasn't, you know, the way the container looked, because that can be a lot of things. And people need different things. People need to be met in different ways. But in my own being, in my head, and I'd love your thoughts on this because I'm one person and I can only like describe what I notice. But when I know my patterns, a lot of us know our patterns. When I noticed it showing up with another voice of maybe this time it's okay to stay or to listen or to look at that shadow or whatever it is. I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is safe. And
Mhm.
then the other side of that was when my husband got angry. And I don't think we were married at this point, but he got angry in such a way that a man's rage, when it's unchecked, can feel very threatening to a woman. It can feel very threatening to anybody, but to and I stood in the storm, and it wasn't about me. And he was sort of slightly making it about me, but at the same time not. And I could feel the energy in him asking for resolution in our co-container, and I didn't get scared. It was everything that could have been scary, and I was like, "Okay, that's this is what's here right now." And so those 2 signals to me showed me that my container was safe. And the other thing for me, and I'll add this into the picture, this is such a me thing, no lies. Absolute honesty all the time is essential because if you feel like there's anything you have to keep, you feel like there's a censorship that is existing. And I'll qualify that slightly. Not everything needs to be said all the time in the moment that it comes up.
Yeah.
Especially like women, I have a problem with the feminine that's like, oh, my emotional experience is happening right now and you need to hold it right now because it's the right now. No, that's more immaturity. But if you feel like I'm having this thought and I can't share that, I can't share that
Yeah.
and I won't, that's not a safe container. And it requires self-awareness because sometimes you think you can't, but you just don't want to because you don't want to go into that vulnerability.
Mhm.
But if something becomes a conversation you cannot have with your partner, that's by default not safe. And those things, sometimes they're to be leaned into and worked on, and sometimes that's just not the container for you.
Do you, for yourselves, would you also imagine for other couples that it's a useful exercise to have a conversation, an agreement of sorts of how we will deal with conflict? Meaning, like we can say you can do all the things, and we agree that that's okay in this space, and
Mhm.
you know, and I'll have my experience. I mean, and we had that conversation way in advance, so when it happens, there's no surprises. We know that, like, we built a verbal container of sorts, but this is okay to do this stuff. Is that part of this?
I think it's really important to do that, and I think it's sometimes that's too formal for people, and sometimes, especially for the masculine energy, and it can be the masculine in the women,
Yeah, yeah.
having the container, that's the intentional thing that people want to mess with because it's a rule and they need to break the rule. And then that's the edge.
Mhm.
So I think as long as one, you hold those rules lightly, and two, the thing that I like to do in my relationship is it's not formalized, this is the way we're going to deal with conflict. We have a daily check-in. We do it
Nice,
every single
nice.
day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and it's non-negotiable. We have literally 11-month-old babies. We did these check-ins in the bed when they were nursing and last thing at night. We do this every day.
Nothing builds up.
So nothing builds up.
Yeah.
And the funniest build up, so when we have a conflict at like 11 a.m. in the morning and we physically can't get to talking about it. So we do stony silence all day. But we know we're going to go on our walk and we're going to get this check in. And
Yeah.
we know we're going to, and it's like, it's such a safe thing because it's like, it's not the conflict clearing conversation. It's not, oh, this is the pattern that I need to then go and have this approach. And we've agreed this way. It's it's okay. It's okay. Check in time, we can talk about it, and I can think about it till then, and we can be in our own spaces until then, if we need to be. If not, there's no.
You know, as a somatic practitioner, I want to share of like one way I think about these things and get your pushback or agreement, whatever it is. So, like for instance, when I work with, let's just say a couple, but I'm working with an individual within the couple,
Mm,
and let's just say that the one of the individuals doesn't do anger very well, so that they repress the anger, they can contract against it. It's not something they express. I'm telling personal. This is my biography here, or autobiography. Uh, so that they don't do anger, but they're like they recognize the need that's unhealthy not to do so, and the conversation with their partner is, "I don't know how to do this at all, and I'm gonna do it very, grossly, like, I'm not gonna do this perfectly. I don't even know what that even means. It's gonna be all over the place as I learn to feel and express in healthy ways the anger." And what I will have clients do in couples, like, to share that conversation. So they're creating a container so the other person knows, like, oh, he or she has never done the anger thing well.
yeah.
We're going to create an agreement around, like, yeah, you can express it. I'm not surprised that it comes out in weird ways until you kind of
Mhm.
learn how to regulate, manage it, deal
Yeah.
with it, express.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I call this my say the whole paragraph thing. So the thing that we humans tend to do is we edit what we have inside us to give people the take home because it's more efficient. But when it's something like this, the edited end point is often, as you said, imperfect. It's unpracticed. It's
Yes.
messy. Yeah. And so what I say similarly is say the whole paragraph. So it is like if you're walking into that thinking, I really hate that I'm going to do this. And I hate that because I fear that I'm going to hurt my partner, but I have to say this and I have to say all of that because it's all relevant for the
Mhm.
other person understanding what's inside you. And we forget with our amazing verbal techniques that we're communicating long before we open our mouths and say the first word.
Yeah, of course.
And long before we like get to the crux of the issue. And in those moments, the interpretation on the other side is often not 100% accurate. So I'm a very sensitive person. I'm sure you are too. And I'm not accurate a lot of the time. I'm sensing something. I can pick up on there's a something, but if I were to label it, I would be wide of the mark. It would be a projection field
Mm.
in some way. But if that other person labels it for me, and they label their nervous system's insecurity and the fact that they're worried of hurting me and the fact that I suddenly have an explanation for all of that tension that I was experiencing in my system, and I don't have to guess at what that's there for. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can take
yeah.
the nervous system map and the words, and I know exactly what's happening. And when I get triggered, which I likely will, because this person's about to be whatever, I can also say, well, I know you said that you were scared of hurting me, and I'm experiencing some kind of hurt, and I know you didn't mean to. So can you just hold my hand so we can get through, or whatever it is?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, yeah.
It
Yeah.
opens the whole floor to being just real. Hence, no regulation before you relate, because all of that gets lost if you have to regulate, because you learn that you feed back to the other person only when you've taken what, 6 deep breaths. But no, like, my real self is experiencing this real thing, and we're a team. And so in that teamwork, can we work together to be on the other side of whatever it is that we're experiencing?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I call what I when I hear you explain it, I say, "Oh, that's the advanced work." But you're saying that's the primary work. That's like, because the way my mind goes is like the one of the two members of the couple are less likely to share whatever their truth happens to be if they think the other person's not going to receive it in a certain way. The other person's going to shut down and not talk to them for days or weeks, or
Yep.
become hyper aggressive. The thing is that I'm going to withhold.
Mhm.
So, like, I go, okay, let's learn how to show up in those conversations where you're both calm, cool, collected. And I know this goes contrary to what you just said. Learn how to co-regulate, create the safe space, and then the advanced work is like, okay, then you can come in because you know the other person is not going to like disappear for hours and days and weeks, and or call for like the most extreme thing. I'm not going to put up with this shit. I want a divorce on the smallest thing. Those kind of things because you build some safety and trust. But
Mhm.
I like to call that advanced work. but
And
I
I
but
don't
I hear you
necessarily
saying like, but that it's not inauthentic to some degree or another.
and I don't disagree that it's the advanced work, except that why do we as humans want to put in a first stage, which is actually more difficult? I'm just saying, it's like, it's so innate in our profession to deal with the individual. And it's correct in a sense, because when you do couples work, it's actually very rare for people to do couples work. Most of the time in our business, we're working with one half of the relationship. And in
Yeah,
those settings, we know our job is not to tell this one person that it's all the other person's fault or anything. We're dealing with one person. And that's absolutely unnatural, because that one person is never that one person in that dynamic of a couple. And so what we do in that situation is we give them the tools that we can regulate. Here's all the calming down stuff. Here's this, here's that. The one thing that I do end up feeling that that gives to that one person is the sense that they are responsible for the other person's feelings,
yeah,
development.
that's a problem. Yeah,
And that's as you say, it's often selfish. It's often actually, I'm only responsible because I don't want their feelings to then come back negatively onto me.
yeah, yeah,
But it's still behaving like a parent in a situation where your system wants to be a child. And actually, it's saying to that child in the system, grow the F up, have this as a grown ass adult, instead of being really in the child space. And I think the other thing is that the the time that we allow for some of this, just like on the scale of, we need to have a super messy conversation that isn't going to get resolved in one night. It's going to create stuff. We're still going to have to go to bed together in the same. Sometimes the beginner's work, as you were saying, not the advanced, seems more expedient. It seems kind of quicker. It seems like we'll get to resolution sooner. And it's another great trick of the human being. It's like being on the other side of the gauntlet feels way better than being in the gauntlet. So what techniques can we have to get through really quickly? Never mind. I said I was an escape artist. That's not that. If I can run through this gauntlet more quickly, I'm going to do it every single time. But like, there is no, there's no love that learning. Yes, it's advanced work, but learning. I'm in the midst of a conflict that is unresolved, and I'm still going to curl up and go to bed with this person. I'm still safe, and it's still going to be there in the morning that we need to pick up this thread,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's going to take time. And all of that is so deeply surprising to your system when you do it the first time. And then you do it,
Yeah.
and you wake up, and they're still there, and
Yeah.
there's
So,
still a thread. And it's like, oh, you're learning the complexity of being in a real human relationship that is not always fine, but always with that thread of we come back to the table and we stay at the table as long as we need to finish the messy meal.
yeah. Yeah. So this is great. Like okay, for next month, I have to sit and think about all these things. This is awesome. Let me share another thing, and I love your pushback and feedback on it because one of the things I talk about with couples is me to we. Me, don't give up on yourself. Have boundaries. Know who you are. Know what your desires, needs, and wants are. That's all wonderful. I'm not suggesting you like 100% altruistic and you give up yourself for the other person. The framework inside of a relationship is the we space. Like it's us against the challenge as opposed to that person is the challenge and I'm going to
Right.
prove in a court of law that they're wrong and I'm right. We do this whole tit for tat thing.
Yeah.
But when I talk about the me to we space, it's not just a cognitive thing. It's a somatic thing because you actually
Mhm,
have to believe it in your whole system
mhm.
that I'm going to wake up next to this person tomorrow, even though it's unresolved. I'm going to work with this person for the next, next period of time. And I know we're going to get through these things because that's the kind of the agreement we have. I keep going back to like, but the somatic piece of it, but it requires like belief inside the nervous system, which requires some regulation. So you're not wanting to jump like the minute that the thing happens and you're triggered, like I'm getting the F out of here. I'm out of here. I mean, you
Right.
might feel that. And I never suggest clients don't feel what they feel.
Mhm.
Feel those things. You don't have to act on them.
No, but you do have to name them. So the only way to make that container safe is to say to the other person, "I'm really wanting to get out of here right now. Like
Okay,
I'm having
fair.
every
Perfect.
impulse inside of me that I
Perfect.
need to leave."
I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, leaving is also a somatic thing. And in your mind, I'm leaving the planet. I'm like going to like Timbuktu. In your body, you can go for a walk around the block and it's the same difference because all you needed was to be away from the container. And your impulse is run to the different country. All your body needs is to have the capacity, and that we're not into fighting stress responses. If it's so powerful that you actually need to walk out the door and walk
Yeah,
around
yeah.
and doing those things is often the on-ramp to doing some of the staying. So it's not do the fight, the flight. Don't do those things, but just do them in a
Knowledge.
small, manageable way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
knowing what you're doing. I'm going for a walk around the block because I need to exercise my leaving instinct, and I'll be back in
Yeah,
5 minutes. Yeah,
yeah.
and I do this, I still do this, and I get, like, out the door when I get to the end of my driveway, and I'm like, "Okay, that I I
That's
I I don't need to quite go on this entire walk now, and does it look too bad to just walk back in?" And
yeah, yeah.
'cause you still need to vent the physiological expression,
100%.
but you don't
Yeah,
need to
the
go
way
with
the way I talk about that is with couples, like, just having a verbal agreement that that might occur. So the other person who might have the abandonment issue,
Yes.
they're not gonna take you walking out the doors, you're leaving the relationship. You're just leaving to save the relationship in the short moments so something stupid doesn't come out of your mouth. But even
Yeah.
knowing that the other person has that propensity to do that, and they do that,
Right.
you know it in advance as a possibility seems to be helpful.
It does, and also timing it. So especially with abandonment people, there is a and I've got this strange disorganized attachment style, so I
Oh,
need to be given, like, parameters around the leavingness that isn't too close, it isn't too far. So if there's going to be that happen, it's like, I need to take 27.5 minutes away from this situation. As long as it's approximately right. I'm being slightly facetious because nobody totally understands how much time they're going to need, but I will be back at this time to reconnect to this space, and the agreement is that you keep those agreements. Even if you come back and go, "I came back because I said I would, I still need another half an hour."
yeah,
It's
yeah.
fine. It is just keeping the connection. Um, and the other thing to say about all of this, that the me to we, that I love what you're talking about. And I also just want to really point out two things. It is absolutely impossible to fully feel in a we space within any container that we have because we're always the I. So the connection that we have, that that meeting point is always a boundary. It isn't just emerging. It shouldn't be emerging. We always have to retain it.
Yeah, I get that.
And so if people struggle with this complicated separation of sovereignty, selfness, identity, my pursuit, my life, and being in a team, like being in a partnership, it's very obvious to the other person energetically when that person is on mission self versus mission partnership.
Mm.
It's not as obvious to the person who is on mission self. And it's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
not
yeah.
as obvious by the actions that they do. So, to give you another example from my own life, my husband is very used to a solo life. He's very independent. He's brilliant and can be very self first. It's in his designs, it's how he's built. And it is somewhat effortful for him to remember that he's in a partnership. The moment he
Mhm.
does, it's like, oh, I've got a friend, I've got a partner, I've got a co-anchor, I've got like an ally here. But he's so used to, and it's partly childhood trauma patterning. There's a whole kind of like, oh, I'll just do it myself then. That energy.
Yeah, yeah,
There.
yeah, yeah.
I notice even when he's doing the things for the family, when he's doing them in a selfish space, because he's doing it so he can feel like he's done it, he feel accomplished. It's not for the team.
Got
And
it,
so
got it, got it.
those things really have to get recognized for what they are. And that is imperfect humans in their individuality trying to be part of a partnership.
Right, right, right.
And that effort is worth its weight in gold. And that's
Yeah.
taken me a long time to think that, because I was the one who was like, well, wait a second, this has to be teamwork all the way through. And that's, it's so alien to some individuals to be in
Mhm.
a team, even if they really want to be. So
Yeah.
sometimes I just have to really anchor into our systems as the in my attachment, like I need to be attached here, recognizing what is effort is also an attempt to attach, even when it doesn't feel like it.
I love that. That's brilliant. And I'd even add in, because you talked about, like, on a daily basis, you guys do a check-in. And I recommend all my couples to do regular rituals, like daily rituals of that kind of connection. And it's not always for the reasons you just shared, but it's also for the reasons you just shared. So you can go from the agenic, it's I'm doing my thing, like, wait, I do have a husband or a wife, and yeah, I want to engage with them and have them part of this whole experience.
Mhm.
So ritualizing daily activities can be helpful to those ends.
Yeah, and the deep recognition of feminine energy versus masculine energy. And I mean that in a very purist way. And we don't have time for me to go into that in depth right now, because that's like a 7-hour lecture on like ancient
That's next week.
archetypal like principles of the I Ching. But the essence of it is that it is really common that the female needs more information than the man tends to habitually give. And that is just something that in heterosexual partnerships or partnerships where there is the dominant female is the dominant feminine energy, and reverse it and insert whichever like alternatives you want, it works the same. There is always one partner who fails to inform in the context that the other partner needs.
Needs. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
one of those situations where there is really no compromise in this. Yes, the partner who needs more information has to lighten up a little bit and trust
Mhm.
that in the absence of some of the information, the salient points get conveyed. The problem with that is that that partner has a very strong experience of like the missing salient points a lot of the time. So the job there is twofold. And this is what the feminine principle gets wrong in this dynamic. They have the expectation of content and delivery of context and information, but they're not often very good at inviting it out of the other person. They're
Mm.
great at lecturing when it doesn't come,
Ah,
and they're great at like
yeah, yeah.
being like, "How could it not done?" Great at that, but the invitational energy to set up the infrastructure so it's easy for the masculine energy to
Yeah.
offer the context of more information is essential on behalf of the feminine. And it's actually simpler than you think. One, just knowing that they're not going to look at the complicated schedule that you've created for the purposes of your unit is, you just know that they're not going to look at it. And two, feel okay asking the questions. It's not pestering and it's not nagging to go, hey, did you like have that conversation with that person? Are we doing that thing? And bear in mind, for those unaware who are listening to this podcast, my husband is also my business partner. So we do everything together. We run a business, we live a life, we manage babies, we manage stepkids, we manage so much.
You manage patients.
We manage so many, like the whole thing, and MDs and all that. But like it's
Yep.
a busy life, and it it really is a case of making it fun and a joke to have that share of like, oh, what didn't you tell me about that conversation you had with that person? It's like, shall I? And it's somewhat jesty, but it's like, shall I just make up this email because I have no context? Because it lightens the humorous load that men have, a man in my context, that the masculine energy has, where it has no flipping idea why the woman needs as much information as they do. They just don't see it. And but pointing it out to them afterwards and being like, the reason I needed that context is because my brain is running these things.
Yeah.
And instantly my husband's like, I see how that would have been helpful. So it's being really in the recognition that
Yeah.
we're not designed to be the same. We're designed to find ways to work together.
And from what I'm hearing you say, it takes a lot of curiosity and playfulness to make all this really work.
It takes the ability to laugh at oneself. And the reason I really bring it back to that is because it can feel patronizing to the other to be laughing at their patterns because it puts us in the supercilious, well, it's never my problem. So I have to laugh at my own foibles, especially given what I do and all the things I know. And I just told you, I've known my human design since I was, I don't know, 16.
Yeah.
I should have mastered this by now, right? But there has to come a point where, and this is another reason why, just to come back to the reason you reached out to me and the whole regulate before you relate stuff. In the midst of my messy, crying, teenage argument, bitchy, that I get to laughing. Always. And that only happens because I didn't calm myself down first. I literally get there and there's tears and I'm in that space. And then all of a sudden, I realize that I'm being ridiculous. I realize that. I don't need to be told. And then I'm like, oh, and you start laughing. And that is so healing and wouldn't happen if if I'd gone in being like, oh, okay, nonviolent communication.
Yeah, I get that.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. This is great. Hey, due to time constraints, I actually just want to invite you back because we haven't even touched on polyvagal theory and some of your critiques of that and some other things that I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah, well, and we will come back on that, but any model that helps anybody is not a useless waste of space. That's all I'll say. People have just listened to that and get triggered about all the things. But yeah, it's a fascinating way to unpack this space. It speaks to more of what we've been talking about today as well.
Yeah, it's like I said, I'd love to have you back probably multiple different times because I'm like, shit, there goes a challenge to my whole, clarity or philosophy. Cool. I love this. But so please come back, talk about polyvagal and other really cool things. But talk to us about the way you've talked about how you think about the work you do. Talk about the work you do, and like why someone would come to you and what they get by working with you, and then I'll say good things about that because I have worked with you.
Well, one of the things I should say is that I have a habit of naming my things unpronounceable things. So it is temenos. It is a Greek word. It's a sacred space for transformation. The reason I have moved into this branding is simply because I had debating whether to say the full details, and of brevity, I will keep it short. But in recent times, there is a lot of information about bad actors coming out there. They're very famous. We're not going to mention them because you will get shadow banned. I hear all this and I really feel like there should always be the safest space for people to be their darker selves. That is just absolutely essential for everybody. And it doesn't matter who you are. There has to be a safe space to heal. Otherwise, we will just keep creating villains. And so all of my work is taking people who are really ready for the deepest look at the deepest shadows. And you don't have to have done anything terrible, but you could just feel that there is a terrible edge inside you, and creating the infrastructure around that for there to be safety, to be with it and to open it up and to sit really in your Pandora's box of everything and learn more about yourself in a way that feels absolutely safe. And so the reason I have the I Ching, the human design, and the gene keys at its simplest is because, one, they're archetypal technologies that have energetic principles where you can essentially distance yourself from the experience by looking at the themes behind the experience. It's safer to do things that way. It also is safer because it gives us some infrastructure and like architecture to look at charts and a bit arm's length to again make it safer to feel into what it is to be us and what was always there and our default natures. And so ultimately, a lot of my work is moving into much more of a creating a book, which is what's happening at the moment. And a new form of the I Ching is what's been created at this moment in time, which is crazy, but yeah, that's happening.
Okay.
It's the simplest of all these things, partly because I am a full-time mom, 2 babies, and so I have very few spaces for clients, and I really currently am taking people who feel like they've done a lot of work, not beginners, people who've done a lot of this expert dancing through patterns, but still feel like there's a grit in their system that is needing to be worked out. And then we sit in ceremonial containers, and that means nothing to do with medicines or anything. It's a Zoom room. It's like this, but I create space for safety to unfold everything that people feel is part of their shadow sack, if you like. And then we work through it. And we work through it in ways that creates an understanding that is so elemental that you understand the inevitability of yourself. And that is the magic that I try to leave people with.
You mentioned virtual, so which
Mhm.
means you can see clients from all across the globe.
Yes, and my stuff mainly is coaching. My husband and I have a medical side of things, but I do all of the coaching, the internal work side. I see people pretty much everywhere, and I don't do containers shorter than 3 months. Like that's the absolute minimum that people need to feel wanting to do work. But over time, I'm going to have reports available so people can get their own little windows into these things. And the one thing I do if people are interested in all of this is I do one-off sessions. They're called the limen. It's a threshold into the space. And ultimately, that has all of the content of the archetypes and it gives you a taster. So there's that availability. And again, not very many sessions available, but they are available if people are interested in working with me.
That's awesome. So people are listening and watching this and are like, I want to learn more about Victoria's work. Where do they go to find your writing and your offerings?
Best place to go for everything is kind of my Instagram, which is Mrs. Victoria Greer. All of my Substack stuff is linked from there. And so is the website for Temenos, which is the temenos.space.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Victoria. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to having you back to challenge more of my PPP coaches about how the world works.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I always love speaking to you.
Thank you.